With the insiders, Chris Johnston, Pierre LeBrun, and Darren Dreger. Gentlemen, on the heels of Nazem Kadri's 1,000th game celebration, the rumor flames have been fanned yet again. Kadri and his $7 million a year contract are super attractive right now. What are the chances we see him moved out of Calgary, Dregs?
Well, it doesn't seem very likely at this point, but obviously things can change. It's really an issue of supply and demand. We know that there are multiple NHL clubs out there that covet a number 2 center and the experience of Nazem Kadri. But what a night for Kadri, for his family, and the Calgary Flames in celebrating his 1,000th NHL game on Wednesday night. But what I'm hearing, what I'm told, is that Calgary ownership is telling people they are not interested in trading Nazem Kadri. Now, again, a lot can change. We're a long way away from the NHL trade deadline, but at least in the moment, on the heels of this celebration, that's the position of ownership. We also know that Kadri loves Calgary and he wants to win there.
Yeah, in the meantime, Dregs, there's been some chatter about Steven Stamkos in Nashville. I will say this to start, it's pretty premature when it comes to that. There have not been any conversations between the Nashville Predators and any other team to this point this year regarding Steven Stamkos, nor have there been even conversations, I'm told, between GM Barry Trotz and Steven Stamkos, which would have to happen because Stamkos has a full no-move clause. Having said all that, and you knew I was going to say that, if we get to the second half of the season and the Predators are out of a playoff spot, I do believe that the Predators would be open to fielding calls on Steven Stamkos, who has 2.5 years left on his contract at $8 million per. Again, this is up to Stamkos. He actually loves living in Nashville, I'm told, but obviously hockey-wise it's not been a good fit. He'd be pretty picky here. This is not about going to any single situation if something arises. He would certainly have a short list of teams only, and that's if he decides to go down that route.
Well, you guys are mentioning some notable players that may or may not be moved. Let's look at a team I think that we should be focused on, and that's the Utah Mammoth when it comes to the potential trade market. And much the same way, we haven't really seen that market develop just yet, but what we have seen so far this year is a Mammoth team that's off to a much better start than it was certainly last season. They've made no secret, internally or externally, about their desire to make the playoffs, and I believe they're going to be extremely aggressive as we get towards the trade deadline and adding to that team. Now, that could just be the typical deadline additions, depth type of pieces, but the Mammoth bear watching mostly because they have tons of picks, tons of prospects, and the cap room available to get into some higher ticket items if, say, a top 4 defenseman were to come available between now and March 6th.
Pierre, a couple of days ago, you mentioned the Team Canada Brain Trust is going to be in Toronto this Sunday and Monday with the goal of cutting down their list for the Olympic roster deadline of December 31st. And you see the potential as a couple of vets on the bubble, maybe trying to crack the lineup?
Yeah, let me be clear. I'm not saying they're cutting down their list to 25, but I think they will cut it down from a long list of players to 35 players or so by the end of their meeting on Monday. 2 guys that I think is interesting when you see the mock rosters that are being sprung up by media friends around the league. People are quick to want to either take off Brad Marchand or Drew Doughty because of their age. And I will just say this, that Brad Marchand and Drew Doughty and their roles as leaders at the 4 Nations was really well received by management and the coaching staff, in the sense that, as someone said to me, that's a pretty quiet leadership group in general, and Sidney Crosby is one of the greatest captains in NHL history, but more lead by example like a lot of those big stars are. Doughty and Marchand were so vocal, and it made a huge difference in that room. Now, obviously, their play has to get them on the Olympic team, but all things being equal, I think they're valued at a higher degree within Team Canada than maybe they are on the outside looking in.
Speaking of NHL vets on the bubble, the Leafs roster may have too many bodies and not enough room for them. Where do the Leafs go from here, CJ?
Well, they've got a lot of forwards up and down the organization, and one whose status has been a little bit unclear in the last week is David Kampf. He's been away from the Toronto Marlies, pondering his future, what he wants to do next. I'm told that could be coming to a resolution by this weekend. Could even see Kampf rejoin the Marlies. We'll see what happens there. Meanwhile, Easton Cowan demoted on Wednesday. That's because of 14 forwards who don't have as easy of a trip up and down between the AHL and NHL. But I'll say this. What stands out to me is this isn't only a problem maybe for the coaching staff, some hard decisions, some of those players, but from a management standpoint, they're quite comfortable having the depth.
Over the summer, the Ottawa Senators signed Arthur Kaliyev. He's back in the news again. According to a report in the New York Post, the latest allegations are coming from his ex-girlfriend, Dregs.
Yeah, I mean, the National Hockey League, Gino, is following up on the additional allegations as presented in the New York Post article earlier this week. Now, be mindful of the fact, as you've identified, the NHL has looked at past allegations, and they went through a lengthy process. Several weeks ago, they found no NHL rule had been broken at that point. So this latest run of allegation, the National Hockey League absolutely will look at. The NHL Players Association is involved, and I should remind anyone that when it comes to off-ice stuff, gambling, etc., it's all covered under Article 18A in the collective bargaining agreement. And if they find that a rule has been broken, if something illegal has been done, then obviously they will deal with Kaliyev at that point.
They are the insiders, Chris Johnson, Pierre LeBrun, and Darren Dreger.